my honor and privilege to welcome you to yet another edition of the BW Dialogue. Today we are talking to a innovative thinker, somebody who promotes design thinking in all aspects. Today we're talking about Dr. Pavan Soni, and we are going to talk to him about his book, Design Your Thinking. First of all, Dr. Soni, thank you for talking to BW Businessworld. Tell us how have been the last 9 months for you, both personally and professionally.
Thank you, Dr. Batra, for inviting me over. Appreciate that highly. So the thing is that over the last so many months now, thanks to COVID, which we were into, I really got a lot of time to write this book down. So we actually got into this book contract somewhere in the month of August last year. And between August and February, I wrote 1 lakh words. And I had to ship it down to Radhika and her team for them to kind of productionize it. From August to February, I wrote 1 lakh words. And from February to August this year, I reduced 1 lakh words to 90,000 words. So the amount of time it took me to actually go from 0 to 1 lakh was same as it took me from 1 lakh to 90,000. And trust me, that last 10,000 words reduction was the most interesting part of the entire process. So I think the design thinking is, something that I acted upon as a part of the last 9 months or so. And it was a blessing in disguise. It was really a blessing in disguise. I'm really so sorry that you got contacted, but this was for me at least an amazing experience to have gone through this journey.
I'll be fully recovered soon, so thank you for that. Only thing is that
absolutely, sir.
It makes you fatigued for no reason.
Absolutely.
So there is coming back to design your thinking. Now, the role of design thinking in solving everyday problems is possibly undervalued. Give us a sense of how did this book come about, and give us a sense of the chapters in the book.
Absolutely. So I have been in the space of creativity and innovation consulting since the year 2005. For the last 15 years or so, I've been trying to face of how do you bring the discipline to this otherwise chaotic approach of problem solving. Now, Indians are creative. There's no doubt about that. And we have this adage of creativity called jugaad mind. But the problem that most Indians face is lack of discipline. That how do you couple this very strong desire to create with the ability to execute it all the way down? And the intent of this book was bring that discipline into the way we otherwise solve problems. Now, design thinking came into vogue over the last 6 years or so, thanks to the work of IDEO, Stanford D School, David Kelly, Tom Kelly, Tim Brown, etc. And I got inducted into that space. And I started practicing with a lot of organizations. Last years or so, 400 workshops in the space of design thinking and creative problem solving. And I thought that here is a time to scale up this entire model and try to write the practices and case studies down into the form of a book. The reason why the book was a very big chapter in my own life is because I always thought that design thinking is largely misconstrued. And it is misconstrued on 3 dimensions. Firstly, the word design is a misnomer. People think that design thinking is about designing something, like a contraption, like an electronic device, or some kind of a jazzy, clever product. Whereas design thinking is not about designing, it's about thinking. That's the key thrust which I want to bring to the table, that you can pretty much don't design anything at all. You have to design your thinking, and hence the title of the book. The second thing was, whenever I look at design thinking, we have the same old case studies from IDEO, Apple, Google, Samsung, Amazon, Microsoft, Nike, IKEA, but we didn't have any single case study from India to talk about. Not that we are not designing or innovating, but we are not celebrating as much as we should be. We don't have case study of Mahindra, Tanishq, Titan, Big Basket, Big Bazaar, Tata Group, a whole host of wonderful things, Maruti Udyog Limited, whole host of wonderful things that we are doing right here in our country, which we need to celebrate. That was the second thrust. So first thrust was to take the notion of design thinking away from designing to thinking. The second was the notion that why not celebrate Indian case studies, the Indianness. And the third major thing was, if I talk to somebody about design thinking, the first thought that occurs to people's mind is that it is only for the high-tech space, for the startup community, for the technology adored and the Western Hemisphere. Whereas we have to understand that, and as you rightly pointed out, it is about day-to-day problem solving. And it can be any problem for that matter. ranging from how to reach to office to what to cook, how to look after your children in the COVID, or how to recover from one. And that's where I want to bring the vocabulary down to everyday common understanding, blend in with a lot of cases from the Indian context, and propose a model which talks about the scaling aspects. If I look at the book, and I have the book right here, this is the book that we're talking about today. And if I look at the chapter, since you asked about that, so this chapter is pretty much modeled around the journey of design thinking. So the first chapter talks about what is design thinking, where I set the ground rule of what is and what is not design thinking, and how is design thinking different from other techniques of problem solving like lean thinking, Six Sigma, Agile, Scrum, lateral thinking, blue ocean strategy, etc. Then I talk about the imperative of design thinking today, that why it is important in the today's time and age. And then look at the tenets of design thinking. And then the next 5 chapters are the 5 steps of design thinking, which is inspire, empathize and define, ideate, prototype and test, and finally scale. And there is one very interesting chapter on how do you conduct a 2-day design thinking program. Because I want to reduce the reliance companies have on consultants like us to run a 2-day program. I've been doing almost 400 programs over the last 15 years. And every time I walk out of a class, the sinking feeling that I get is what happens next. Are they really carrying the baton forward? Are they taking those ideas onto the anvil and trying to test it out? And with this book, I sincerely hope that they don't depend on people like me. Instead, they cultivate some of these practices. So that's the humble attempt, sir, in this particular book.
Okay, Dr. Soni, so you're saying it is possible to inculcate design thinking. Now, tell us, at a very early age, all of us are kind of conditioned not to fail. We have this fear of failure. If you have fear of failure, can you still be great design thinkers? Can you cultivate design thinking?
That's a very good question.
What do we need to change in our culture and in our thinking to be enable us to unlock the immense potential and creativity each one of us has in India?
That's a very good question, in fact, and I'm glad you asked the question. I believe that we need to start taking ourselves a little less seriously. One of the fundamental distinctions, and one of my friends, David Kelly, said that to me, is that one of the core distinctions between people in the Western Hemisphere and that in India, and I do not know how many of my audience would agree to the statement, but I thought it has a lot of merit in the statement. He said that Westerners are driven by guilt. Indians are driven by shame. Now think about that. He says that Sharma ji kya bolenge? That's been the dominant philosophy whenever we take risk and we fail. And not that what will I think about that? Will I be feeling guilty if I fail? And I think the current crop that we are experiencing, they are quite okay to fail. If I look at the founders of Flipkart, both of them are no longer working with Flipkart, and yet they are kind of working on something completely different and pretty happy about it. So the current crop of entrepreneurs that we have in the country have instilled this sense of chutzpah in all of us, saying that yes, you can go out and you can fail. So what we need is more case studies, publications like yourself, where you talk about celebrating entrepreneurship as a culture in the country, which was not. And the classic example which I give is that if you look at Amitabh Bachchan's movies in 1970s and 1980s, every businessman was shown as corrupt and a villain. And we never celebrated business. We never celebrated capitalism. It was always frowned upon. But today, it has become a virtue. So I think if we can, number one, celebrate risk takers. Number two, create a culture of what we call as psychological safety in our organizations. What I mean by psychological safety is that whenever an employee wants to try out something new, the managers must ensure that there is enough budget given to them and there is enough air cover given to the employees to talk about. And I'll give you a simple example, which I've shared in the book also. It's a very interesting story that comes from Tanishq. Now, Tanishq is one of the largest importers of gold in the country. After Reserve Bank of India, the second largest importer is actually Tanishq. And they melt kilograms and kilograms of gold in their factory in Hosur, which is close to Bangalore. And one of the problems that they had in that factory is that once you end up melting gold in a crucible, the crucible is wasted because the pores are sort of sealed and you throw the crucible away. Now they had to scrap gold out of crucible. How do you do that? There was no mechanism available at Tanishq or elsewhere to take gold out of the crucible. So one of the person who was a very low-key employee in the factory what it does is that instead of suggesting any idea to Mr. Bhaskar Bhatt or the who's who of the organization, he pays 200 rupees to his neighbor who owns a road roller. He comes to office next day 8 a.m. on the road roller, puts a chatai on the road, puts the crucible on the chatai and crushes it. In 200 rupees of investment, that day he could fetch 4 kilograms of gold. You can imagine the value of 4 kilograms of gold through those crucibles. Nobody frowned because he took the chance. The only thing is we need to celebrate such cases. We do not have such cases in our country being celebrated. So I think if we can celebrate these cases, give managers, giving people psychological safety that, okay, kuch nahi hoga, I'll be backing you up in case you fail. And third thing is having a disciplined way of performing experiments. If we can do these three things, I guess we'll be slightly more risk tolerant a culture. That's my view on this.
Okay, Dr. Soni, beautiful example of how innovation and design thinking can come from anyone and doesn't have to be expensive. It's
absolutely.
Simple
Absolutely.
solutions for complex problems, if I may put it. Now, as we move forward,
absolutely,
the culture of entrepreneurship in India is growing. Yes. Indian entrepreneurs have role models to look up to, their success stories to celebrate, and become successful themselves. Tell us, when you talk to intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs around you, do you see the germ of design thinking having taken kind of shape in their minds? And finally, will we see a product company out of India? In most businesses, in most domains, we don't have a product company. So tell us, do you see design thinking leading to a product company?
That's a very good question again. That's a very good question again. Let me talk about one company which I admire. That's Big Basket. Now, Big Basket, there is a very interesting book also written by the head of analytics at Big Basket, Hari. And he talks about this very interesting philosophy that how Big Basket is truly customer-centric organization. Much as we talk about Amazon being customer-obsessed company, Big Basket in the Indian parlance, and I'm a consumer of Big Basket for a very long time now. And I think they're truly customer-centric in whatever they have been doing. And the new generation of entrepreneurs are far more disciplined, and they are indeed using some of the tenets of design thinking, whether it be about Flipkart, Oyo, Ola, and a whole range of organizations which I have been studying or have spoken to. They indeed use some of the elements of design thinking, albeit unknowingly. I'm not at all suggesting that they read a book and then they start a company, because if they read a book and start a company, they may perhaps not. They start a company and then along the way, they hire people, their team, and they discipline their act. And that's where the notion of designing your thinking is really coming in, as against the last generation of entrepreneurs, which were mostly family driven. On to the second question, will we see a product company coming out of India? For a very long time now, I've been toying on this idea that instead of putting all our thrust on design on Make in India, which has been our Prime Minister's thrust area for almost last 6 years now, instead of looking at Make in India, why not we look at design in India? And hence the notion of product being the synonym of innovation would no longer be there. It doesn't have to be a product. It can be a concept. So from Make in India, if we can rally around design in India, which is instead of moving down the value chain, if we move up the value chain, look at Milan. Milan still remains as the capital of the world. If somebody asks how many garments get manufactured in Milan, the answer is not many. Garments are manufactured in China, but Milan doesn't have to manufacture garments. So I think if we can rally the design in India can be a very, very big thing for us. It can be made in China or elsewhere, wherever the cost of labor is low, it can be made anywhere else. And to that question, how many things will get designed in India? I'm very, very optimistic. And the reason is twofold why Design India is going to be a very big movement going forward. And I'm really hooting for that. The first reason is we have one of the largest consumer bases in the world, both in terms of spending power, capacity, diversity of perspectives. We are very demanding, very savvy customers. And I think that really makes a tremendous sense. And the second thing is we have a diversity of talent. Diversity on the supply side and diversity on the demand side. I think we are quite unstoppable when it comes to new product development. It doesn't have to be a physical product is the only thing which I think of. We should not look at just a physical product.
Okay. Thank you for making that shift in our thinking that we have to move away from manufacturing a product to creating concepts and creating designs, and the production can happen anywhere in the world, whether Vietnam, whether Bangladesh, whether in India.
Absolutely.
Now let me move to
Absolutely.
my next set of questions. Dr. Soni, if you had to make top 3 predictions as we move into 2021 about the future of work, about the future of workplaces, what would those be?
My first prediction would be a growth of entrepreneurship. In the last 6 months to 12 months, what we have learned is that one employer is not a model of the future. We need to have people with multiple affiliations, multiple jobs, almost like overlapping jobs. And hence, if there was ever a time for you to really, aboard the entrepreneurial wagon, this is the time. So I think we would see a lot more entrepreneurs, a lot more freelancers, a lot more people participating in the gig economy. Gig economy is going to be huge. All these years, gig economy was only for the likes of Uber, Swiggy, but now the white collar gig economy is going to be huge, not the blue collar gig economy. That's number one prediction which I have, and that we have all the reasons to be doing. So people have learned that they can actually work from anywhere as long as they have internet connectivity. So the big hypothesis that we had, that IT industry needs to have those big campuses like what Infosys and Wipro has, only when people are work, that big hypothesis is now being challenged. And now we can have people working from almost anywhere and as long as they want to work. That's the first big prediction which I have. The second element is that India is going to move up the value chain from services to designing. Because services-based revenue which we have today, whether it is about what IT industry is doing, what biotech, what tourism industry is doing, the IT services revenue is highly headcount dependent. None of the IT industry people have been able to break away from the headcount dependency kind of a model. So I think designing is going to be a very, very big thing. So the first is entrepreneurship and gig economy. The second is the element of design that is going to come in every industry. And third major trend which I see is the whole growth of India as a massive marketplace. I think for a very long time, we have been priding ourselves in being export oriented. But then instead of being export oriented, if we can look at India as a huge market, an untapped market, especially the long tail of the market, that's going to be really disruptive. And disruption is going to happen in many fields. And we just saw disruption happening in the entertainment industry. Tenet, which was one of the largest crossers of the last 1 year, barely could meet his Christopher Nolan's expectations. And that is only tip of the iceberg. Going forward, entertainment industry, music industry, travel and tourism industry is going to see the disruptions. And India can be the epicenter because of our demand and supply. So I think this was a, minus all the negativity of the year, this is a year that shook us, our understanding of capitalism, our understanding of what is job all about, what is family all about, what is meant by growth in terms of GDP. All of that has been fundamentally shook. And I think India can really, really lap onto this opportunity in a very big fashion. And I hope we do so. That's my prediction about it, sir.
Okay, my last question before I bring in Kavi. Dr. Soni, a lot has been said about the transformative nature of technology. You yourself talk about it in your prediction. Now, blockchain technology, for at least the last 3 years, has been kind of knocking at the doors, right? Do you see the blockchain movement becoming mainstream in 2021?
Though I'm not an expert on blockchain, but I think what has happened in the last 1 year or so is, and as Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, very rightly said, that 2 years worth of digital transformation has happened in 2 months. I'm not surprised that if I look at the Gartner's the hype cycle prediction, what Gartner would have predicted that by 2025, this blockchain would have been a mainstream application. It could be accelerated to 2021. It's completely acceptable and completely permissible. And we have the right environment. Look at the farmers movement, which is happening right now. Banking industry revolution, which is happening right now. Cold supply chain. Even vaccination. The vaccination drive that we are having in India can be a perfect case study for the application of blockchain. So what would otherwise happen 4 years from now can actually get accelerated right here in our country, because we have the demand, we have the scale, we can do pilots, and we have the talent to pull this through. If blockchain has to go through, and I guess vaccination is the right time frame in India, is the right context for that thing to be pulled through. Time couldn't have been better, is my way of looking at it. We are the right sort of a cycle for this to be pulled through.
Okay, Kavi,
Yes.
Dr. Soni is available to you for asking your set of questions.
So, Dr. Soni, I want to ask you one thing. I want to ask you about, since we're talking about the mind, the first thing when I saw design your thinking, I thought of mind mapping. Now, how is mind mapping different from designing your thinking?
Okay, so mind mapping as a concept is coined by Tony Buzan. And the whole premise of mind mapping is a manifestation of the mind on a
I was lucky enough to meet Tony Buzan 2 years back. I know last year he went to heaven, but I was lucky enough to meet Tony Buzan in India. He came by and saw me. So he just wanted to mention that.
No, absolutely.
And I would follow a lot of
a wonderful person.
mind mapping very subconsciously. Not that, I have come up with an invention that has changed the world, but I follow a lot of things that Tony Buzan espouses in mind mapping in my daily way of doing and thinking. So back to you, Dr. Soni.
Absolutely, and that's what defines your productivity. You are a very, very productive person. So mind mapping is a great tool to bring your collective conscious and subconscious in a visible format. That's what mind mapping does. Now, design thinking uses mind mapping as one of the techniques. There are a whole range of techniques that we talk about in design thinking. One of the techniques is called mind mapping. And the reason why mind mapping is very powerful is because of two particular factors. One is mind mapping is visual. And human mind does not think the way we read. I'll give you a simple example. Next time when you watch a movie, keep this in mind, you would find it very difficult to forget the plot of the movie. But also you'll find it very difficult to remember the character's name, the lead character's name. It's very, very, unless it is Vijay, right? Amitabh Bachchan, you'll find it very difficult to remember that. So human mind has this amazing ability to remember the broad contours, but always forget the finer details. That's how our mind thinks. Otherwise, you can't store all of that data in your mind. It's impossible. So what mind mapping does is it puts things in connection. When you start connecting things, your ability to remember it, recall it, and draw upon it becomes extremely high. And hence in design thinking, one of the several techniques that we use is mind mapping. We use a lot of other maps such as empathy map, customer journey map, stakeholder map, and whole range of other techniques. So if I were to distill it down, think of a Venn diagram. It has 3 circles. The first circle talks about tools. The second circle talks about skill sets, and third is the mindset. And what I advocate in this particular book, Avi, is the fact that if you want to practice design thinking, you need to develop the right set of skills, such as how do you interview somebody, observation skills, listening skills. The second skill that you develop is the right set of tools, where mind mapping comes in. And third is the mindset. A very good example of mindset is deferring your judgment. That why it is important to not put an idea when you are in the midst of discussing a problem. Because what happens is the moment you go from the problem to the idea, you have technically stopped thinking about the problem. So this is what we advocate in this particular discourse on design thinking.
Okay, sir.
It's a good question though.
Thank you, sir. So, like the human mind imagines a lot. We spend quite a lot of time in imagination, subconsciously also, consciously also. So when you talk about designing your thinking, what about the distractions and the imagination part that comes in? How do we not eradicate? How do we reduce that so that we think more productively?
So just to paraphrase,
it's a good question again. So let me take you back.
We worry a lot. We worry a lot about things that haven't happened or not likely to happen, but we worry a lot about things. That's what Kavi is saying. Is there a way to deal with anxiety and worry?
Absolutely, it's a very good question. It's a very, I didn't expect the question, by the way, but it's a very good question nonetheless. In this book, in one of the chapters, I talk about Dalai Lama. and the whole aspect of mindfulness and meditation, that how mindfulness and meditation is linked to creativity. And there are lots of people who have spoken about this particular thing, including Daniel Goleman, who talks about emotional intelligence. And he says that two things we need to bear in mind is that if you want to think creatively, you need to be very focused, at least about the problem. We say that the problem has to be in your focus, but the solution has to be out of focus. And the second thing, which might be of tremendous value to the audience here, is practicing mindfulness. I've been trying to practice it myself for quite some time now, thanks to my wife. But beyond that also, I think if you really want to be creative, you need to practice mindfulness. Because if I were to paraphrase David Packard, the co-founder of HP, David Packard very rightly said, most startups do not die out of starvation. They die out of indigestion. Same applies to people. Most people choke not because of dearth of ideas. They choke of too many ideas. I've never seen people who do not have ideas. I have seen people who have too many ideas and they are unable to act on those. And that's where I'm saying that if you can be mindful, if you can kind of your prefrontal cortex, if you can calm this part of the body, this the prefrontal cortex, if you can calm it down and focus on few things that really make a huge difference, only then you would be really proud of your ideas. Otherwise, ideas in the Google economy are dime a dozen. There is hardly any merit for having so many ideas. And that's why in this particular book, I have this very important chapter, Inspire. Why leaders, the greatest thing that leaders can do is to channelize people's effort into a collective direction, which makes sense. Whether it was a Kennedy statement in 1962, they put a man on the moon, or Modi's statement about Make India, or any of those statements, they kind of allow you to focus it down, that channel energy. And the last chapter which I have is called Scale. And I always believe that the only proof of innovation is scale. There is no proof of innovation, right? Dr. Batra can have many ideas, but the only proof is BW. There's no other proof. The proof is that he can do these interviews over and over and over again, and he can publish them. That's the only proof. Scale is the only proof of an idea. And you can scale only one or two ideas in your lifetime. I think mindfulness and a tremendous amount of focus is very critical. Otherwise, you might get exhausted by overthinking and too many ideas. So that's what I've seen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
That's so much, Soni. We thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. I'm sure our viewers did. Their comments, Rajesh Kumar Thekar is saying, happy to join a work in Tata Motors and have implemented a few innovative examples where multiple benefits combine together to get me exponential results. There are two other comments, Rajesh Kumar Thekar is also saying how to leverage Jagadgiri. I'm sure he means Jugadgiri for innovation and maximum benefits. Amol Agarwal is saying how do we intertwine Make in India and design in India. So these are the kind of comments and questions coming. I want to ask you my last question and let you go. As we move into 2021,
sure.
And 2020 for a lot of people has been a tough year, both from a life standpoint and a livelihood standpoint. What are the universal, life-changing advice that you would like to give? For example, we've discovered we need to be healthy. Breathing matters, immunity matters. We've known this for a while. We know that, you rightly said, I keep saying fish dying from overeating. They never die from undereating, right? Human body is also a bit like that. We consume too much, If we consume lesser, possibly we'll do better. So give us, as we move into 2021, what are your advice to young entrepreneurs and young professionals who are trying to make an impact in their ecosystems?
It's a good question, and I'm glad you asked the question as a parting thought. If I may, my humble request to all my viewers today is the enduring importance of taking risk. And I believe that the last 1 year has taught us, reminded us that how really vulnerable we are. We are on this spaceship called Mother Earth, and that's about it. We are on this spaceship, and we are extremely vulnerable people. It could have been anybody who would have not been lucky enough to sit on this talk right now. That was the kind of year that we had. That's the nature of the year that we had. Because our life is so vulnerable, we need to put a premium on taking risk. We really need to take a risk. and it's important because I would have been contemplating in my lifetime to write a book. The key was to take that risk of writing a book and putting it out. Now, it might either turn out to be an absolute flop, or it might turn out to be a reasonably good book. But I would never get to know either of the two unless and until I pen down my thought. And the second piece, apart from taking risk, is discipline. I know a lot of people who take risk, okay, but they don't follow that risk taking with discipline. Even the person who is driving at 150 kilometers an hour on a highway is also taking risk. That's not the kind of risk that we are entertaining here. We are saying that we need to take risk. This is the time because life is vulnerable, and that's what we have learned. And follow it up with a tremendous amount of discipline. And discipline needs trade-off. When I used to write a book, I had to say no to so much of business, right? I have to say no to a lot of speaking assignments, a lot of consulting workshops, because I know that I have a deadline to meet, and thanks to Penguin and team, they really were, and they have some amazing people. I must put on record here. Penguin has some really amazing people. Vineet Gill, I work with, amazing person to really get my book brushed upon. So 3 things, if I may. First is importance of taking risk. Second thing is importance of discipline. And third thing is importance of saying no. You need to say no to things that are not going to give you a leverage in the long run. Because I know for a fact that when I'll retire 20, 30, 40, never I'll retire. One thing which I'll be particularly proud of is this book. I'll not be particularly proud of another workshop which I did, another talk which I gave. I'll forget about all of that in the long run. But book is something that I'll be proud of. Same for Dr. Batra. What he'll be proud of is a franchisee called BW that he has managed to create. He'll conveniently be forgetting this one interview, the 201st interview, which we are doing a rerun, by the way, today. My mistake here. He would not be remembering this, but he'll be remembering the franchisee which he has created. And the team, the wonderful team with Kavi, Deepak, Ratnesh, etc. that he has created. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Soni. Thank you for being gracious, being kind. Kind is the most important virtue. We need to be kinder to each other because all of us are fighting some battle or the other. But I wish you luck, and I'm sure you said the right things about taking risk, about being disciplined, and the ability to say no when needed. I think if you have these 3, you can pretty much have an impactful and fulfilling life. We wish you luck from BW Businessworld. We recommend your book, Dr. Pavan Soni.
Thank you, sir.
Book. I'd like you to show the book once again. It's called Design Your Thinking. It would help you think in a structured way to be able to create something that has a lasting value. So all the best to you. For those of you who
handy with me this
dialogue, you can read it in the next issue of BW Businessworld, or read it on the businessworld.in website.
Thank you, sir.
Or watch it on the YouTube channel of BW Businessworld. Thank you once again, Dr. Soni and Dr. Soni, and we wish you luck, and we look forward to more conversations in 2021. Thank you. God bless you.